All right, Math 2 students, the purpose of this video is to help you review everything about adding, subtracting, and multiplying polynomials. We're going to start by adding and subtracting polynomials. I think a better name for this kind of problem is combining polynomials. And we're going to combine these two polynomials that have a plus sign in between. And I like to say that that's combining this and that. Then we're going to combine these two polynomials that have a minus sign in between. And I like to say that we're combining this and the opposite of that. So to start with, we're going to combine this and that. So we have terms like this. We have an x squared term. We have some x terms. And we have some constant terms. So I'm going to line these up in columns with terms that are alike. Remember, like terms have the same exponent with the same variable. So I look for 3x to the second. There's no other x to the second. So I'm going to put my 3x to the second there. I'm going to cross that out. Then I have a negative 2x. I have a positive 17x. And a 4. And my last constant term is negative 3. So now I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. And there are my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms. But now I have them organized or grouped into groups of like terms that have the same variable and same exponent. So in my answer, I will have a 3x squared. I will have a 15x. And I will have a 1. So my answer is 3x squared plus 15x plus 1. Now I'm going to combine this and the opposite of that. The first thing I'm going to do though is see which columns do I need so that I can group my like terms together. So I see that I have x squared terms, I see that I have x terms, and I see that I have constant terms. So I have a negative 2x squared here. I have a 4x here. I have a negative 3 here. And this is where you can't make a mistake. We're combining this and the opposite of that. So even though I look and I see a 5x squared, the opposite of that is negative 5x squared. Even though I look and see a negative 3x, because of that negative sign, the opposite of that is positive 3x. And finally, I see a positive 7, but because of that negative, the opposite of that is negative 7. So now I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 terms, so I didn't forget any. Now I need to combine them together. So negative 2x squared and negative 5x squared is negative 7x squared plus 7x minus 10. Now here's a problem to try for yourself. Combine 8x squared plus 3x minus 6 minus 4x squared minus x plus 10. All right, so now we're going to take a look at multiplying polynomials. We started out by multiplying binomials and binomials, and there was 3 methods that we learned: the distributive property method, the table method, and we learned how to do it by using something called FOIL. So the first problem we're going to take a look at is we're going to take a look at multiplying this binomial, 4x plus 3, times this binomial, 2x minus 1, by using the FOIL method. So when we used the FOIL method, we made room for 4 monomials. The first monomial, we found it by multiplying the firsts. The second monomial we found by multiplying the outer terms. The third one we multiplied the inner terms. And then we got the last term in our answer by multiplying the last terms. So here are our 4 terms right here. And when we look at this binomial, this comes first. And in this binomial, this comes first. So when we multiply our firsts, we get 8x to the second. Now when we look at all 4 of them together, this is on the outside, and this is on the outside. So those are our outer terms. That's negative 4x. Then when we're looking for our inner terms, if those are the outer terms, these ones left over right here are the inner terms. That'll make 6x. And then in this binomial, this comes last. And in this binomial, this comes last. So when we multiply our lasts, we get negative 3. So now we have 4 terms. But what we need to notice is that these two terms have an exponent of 1 and a variable of x. So those are like terms, and we can put those together. So our final answer will be 8x squared plus 2x minus 3. On this problem, we're going to multiply the binomial 5x plus 1 by the trinomial 3x squared minus 8x minus 4. And we're going to use that by making a table. Making a table is definitely the best way to do this. Some people try to use the distributive property, and it becomes very confusing for them. So since it's a binomial and a trinomial, I'm going to make a table that is 2 rows and 3 columns. And where my 2 rows are, I'm going to put the terms of my binomial. And where my 3 columns are, I'm going to put the terms of my trinomial. And then I need to multiply to fill in these 6 monomials here. So 5x times 3x squared is 15x to the third. 1 times 3x squared is 3x squared. 5x times negative 8x is negative 40x squared. 1 times negative 8x is negative 8x. 5x times negative 4 is negative 20x. And negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. So I filled in all 6 of my terms. And what I need to realize now is that this term and this term have the same variable and the same exponent. So those are like terms and they will be combined. This term and this term have the same variable with the same exponent, so they will be combined. So although that I have 6 terms right now, my final answer will only have 4 terms. So my final answer is 15x to the third minus 37x squared minus 28x minus 4. All right, now here's one for you to try. Multiply this binomial by this trinomial. Now we're going to review one more thing about multiplying polynomials. There are certain polynomials that have patterns that are easily recognizable, and if you understand these patterns, you can multiply more quickly when you see that you can use the patterns, and it really helps later on when you're learning how to factor if you understand what these patterns are. So we are looking at the binomial squared pattern, and we know we can use the binomial squared pattern here because we have a binomial in parentheses squared. Here we're going to use the sum and difference pattern, and we know that we can use the sum and difference pattern because we have a 3x in our first binomial and a 3x in our second binomial. We have a 2 in our first binomial. We have a 2 in our second binomial. The only difference between these two binomials is here the 2 is positive and here the 2 is negative. It's a sum and difference pattern. So we're going to start out with the binomial squared pattern. The binomial squared pattern goes like this. You have to identify that this is your first term and this is your last term. And then you're also going to need to know that the first times the last is negative 2x. So what the pattern says is you're going to take your first and square it. You're going to take your last and square it. And then you're going to take your first times your last and multiply that by 2. And that's how you can use the binomial square pattern. So when I look at a problem like this, instead of using the distributive property or making a table or using FOIL, I'm just going to look at my first term and go, oh, 2x squared. That's 2x times 2x, which is 4x squared. I look at my last term. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. And then I look what I got when I multiplied my first and last. That's a negative 2x. And I need to multiply that by 2, so that'll give me negative 4x. So if I have the problem 2x minus 1, that binomial, in parentheses, squared, I should be able to just look at the problem and write down 4x squared minus 4x plus 1. And that is the answer. All right, the sum and difference pattern. The sum and difference pattern works almost the same way. But here, where we have the first and last times 2 to get a middle term, on this problem, our first and last are going to add up to 0. So we will not have a middle term at all if it's a sum and difference pattern. So here's what the sum and difference pattern says to do. Take your first and square it minus your last, which needs to be squared. So this is my first. This is my last. So if I take my first and square it, that means 3x times 3x, which is 9x squared, minus 2 times 2, which is 4, and that would be my answer. All right, so here's a special product to try for yourself. You're going to do the binomial 2x minus 3 squared.